This morning I thought this was going to be a big proud moment. I mean, it's taken you 8.5 years of bullying, of lying, of ignoring democratic referendums. 8.5 years it's taken you to get this treaty through, and on the 1st of December you will have it. And of course the architect of all of this, Giscard, wanted from this constitutional treaty for the European Union to have a big global voice. But I'm afraid the leaders have suffered from a collective loss of nerve. They've decided that they want their faces to be up on the global stage, not somebody from the European Union, and so we've got appointed a couple of political pygmies. The Kissinger question of who to call in Europe hasn't really been answered, has it? I guess the answer can only be Mr. Barroso, because he's the only one that anybody in the world has ever heard of, and is probably the big winner out of these posts. No wonder, sir, you look so happy this morning. And we have a new President of Europe, Herman Van Rompuy. Doesn't exactly trip off the tongue, does it? I can't see him stopping the traffic in Beijing or Washington. I doubt anybody in Brussels would even recognise who he is. And yet, he's going to be paid a salary that is bigger than Obama's, which tells you all you need to know about this European political class and how they look after themselves. But at least he's an elected politician, unlike Baroness Cathy Ashton, who really is the true representation of the modern day political class. In some ways she's ideal, isn't she? She's never had a proper job and she's never been elected to anything in her life. So I guess she's perfect for this European Union.
Excuse me, Mr. Farage.
Yes.
I would like to put down your postages. You made your presentation.
Right, okay.
Is
Yes,
enough
calm
for
down,
us.
chaps.
Okay,
Calm down, chaps.
Please continue.
Calm, no. But, I mean, she's never been elected to anything, and no one knows who she is. Even the Prime Minister was talking about Baroness Ashdown as opposed to Ashton. I mean, no one has ever heard of her. She's even less well known than Herman Van Rompuy. I mean, that takes some doing, doesn't it? She's risen without trace. She's part of this post-democratic age. She married well. She married an advisor and a friend and supporter of Tony Blair and got put in the House of Lords. When she was in the House of Lords, she was given one big job, and the job was to get the Lisbon Treaty through the House of Lords, and to do so pretending that it was entirely different to the EU constitution. So she's good at keeping a straight face, and she vigorously crushed any attempt in the House of Lords for the British people to
There
have a
you
referendum.
go. He's about 5 feet from her, telling her to her face. Then the current head, the sitting chair of the EU, shuts him down, tells him to shut up, and then turns his mic off and cuts to the head of the Poland delegation to call him a bare-butted monkey. And then they tell him, you're not allowed to call names, which he's not doing. He's exposing their fraud. But then we're allowed to call you names. European Union Member of Parliament from the UK, or UEP, Nigel Farage, is our guest. Thank you so much for being on with us, sir. Tell us about that little exchange, because it continues on for some time. It's up on the UK Independence Party website, ukip.org, if folks want to see the full 30 minutes of it.
It's a classic exchange. I mean, okay, you know, my tone maybe somewhat cutting or biting or sarcastic, but I didn't say anything that wasn't 100% true, and I didn't use language that was abusive or wrong or foul. I merely pointed out that Mr. Van Rompuy was a bureaucrat and that Baroness Ashton had these very worrying links, in my opinion, with the campaign for nuclear disarmament, which was being funded by the Soviets, and for that, I was told by the President of the European Parliament that what I'd said was unacceptable, that it simply wasn't right that I should behave in this way. And whilst I was speaking, I was being jeered and barracked and abused. I mean, that always happens now, every time I get up to speak.
Yeah, we can hear lots of chanting, but we can't make it out. I mean, were they just hissing and cussing, or...?
Yeah, they shout and they scream and all the rest of it. But, I mean, I guess all that you know, what you really get from the microphone is me. But, no, they're always very abusive towards me. But it's perfectly okay for them to say that I'm mentally ill. It's perfectly okay for them to call me a monkey. It's fine for them to say that if people support Mr. Farage, it will open the door to fascism. I mean, they can, you know, there is no term of abuse that these people will not sink to. to battle against those of us that are arguing for democracy and are arguing for people to have their own voice and to say what they want to say. And in fact, after that exchange, I was called up to meet the President of the Parliament at 5 o'clock that night. And it reminded me of being in trouble at school and having to go and see the headmaster, and you wait outside the study. And I went in, and I said, look, there's nothing I said or did here that could be deemed to be unparliamentary or wrong in any way at all. Was there, Mr. President? And he said, well, you called them pygmies. And I had trouble not laughing and wetting myself. I said, but surely, to call people pygmies, I said, they're not exactly giants, are they? I said, in future, I'll call them Lilliputians if that makes you happy. When it came to it, there was nothing they could say. I am not abusive, I am not foul-mouthed, I am not rude, and I'm 100% factual. And it reminds me, Alex, of a time 5 years ago when I revealed to the Parliament that the French commissioner had in fact been convicted of embezzlement in the year 2000. Yeah? And I revealed this to the Parliament. Well, it was like a hand grenade had gone off. They all stood up and they abused me, and point of order after point of order was made. The Parliament was told, wasn't it terrible that Mr. Farage had behaved like this? Somebody else said I'd behaved like a football hooligan, which I took real exception to. I was told by the then President of the Parliament that I should withdraw my statement so that it could be expunged from the record or face the full legal ramifications of what I'd just done. And of course, nothing happened because it was entirely true. The bloke had been convicted of embezzlement. But this is what you're up against here. Continually, they throw the abuse at us and we fight back with fact. And
European Union Member of Parliament from the UK, Nigel Farage, is our guest. I want to skip ahead in the 30 minutes that this went on to just one of the people on mic where he's telling you you're not allowed to criticize them, but then he doesn't tell her she's wrong for calling you a monkey. The taller you climb up the tree, the more your butt is exposed. Here is the clip from the Commissar from Poland. Here it is.
Save their integrity, personal integrity. And Mr. Farage, I'd like to say something, Hungarian quotation for you. It's good that you are here, because if the monkey goes up to the tree, it's better seen how red is his popo.
Well, what can you say? They can call me what they like, I don't care. They can call me what they like. If they think they're really helping their cause by just throwing continual abuse at me, they're wrong. They're doing it because they're frightened. And what they're frightened of is that the majority of people in Britain and France and Germany and right across Europe, the vast majority of them, want to live in democratic nation states. They do not want this.
Absolutely. The statements you're making, you're clearly in the right. All of us for liberty and sovereignty and true free republics, representative democracy, we're in the right, they're in the wrong. And for decades, when we would try to cover the plan for the European Union to go global, when we would read official UN documents calling for global government, global governance, the media would call us kooks and nuts, trying to keep people from having a real debate. But now that their system's out in the open, it's actually backfired on them, because hundreds of millions of people have learned about the New World Order, were told it didn't exist. Now they're admitting it exists, but saying it's good. And you talk about the fear in their eyes. I'm seeing that here. And they beg us. They go, please don't talk about how we're tyrants. Please don't talk about how we're undemocratic. Please don't talk about how we're robbing people and want socialism. Please, 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 because people will think you're a kook. No, they're begging us not to stand up against them. Your comments on that?
Well, we've got to stand up and fight. There's a fantastic quotation from a guy called Burke, who was an English philosopher. And he wrote, and again, it's 17th century stuff, but often these old principles remain good. And he wrote that all it takes for evil to prosper is for good men to do nothing. And I would put it to you, Alex, and I would put it to your audience, that what is actually happening in terms of democracy and sovereignty around the Western world is nothing short of evil. And it's our duty to stand up and fight for this. Do you know, those that went before us in previous generations, they had to fight it out in muddy trenches in northern France, and in many cases give up their lives to have democracy, freedom and self-respect. What we're being called upon to do is nothing like as irksome or as difficult as that, but we have to stand up and do it, and I'm pleased to say that increasingly on this side of the pond, people are beginning to do so.
Well, I don't want to take away from World War II veterans and people, amazing folks, but I've read a lot of psychology perspective on this, and sometimes it's harder to morally stand up against a political system when the political system is advertising itself as the only orthodoxy. Sometimes moral courage is harder than when you know people are shooting at you and everybody's on your side, and they're on their side, and you're fighting. That's a lot cleaner and more focused, and you know what you're dealing with. Dealing with the duplicity of, as you said, this German member of the EU said, look, we'll just beat you 50 underhanded ways. It's the fact that it's a covert operation that we're countering. And so what can people do in the